All right, everyone, let's go ahead and get started with our new series. We're going to try to give a video to hopefully answer some of the most difficult topics when it comes to flying. Today's topic, we're going to touch on a few basic things, mostly doing flight planning and other things that surround making those proper decisions as you are deciding whether or not it's a good idea to go on the flight that day or not. So simply here, I'm going to go ahead and pull up my screen sharing capabilities and hopefully get myself a eligible deal here. So we're going to go ahead and set ourselves up to screen share real quick. So if you have any questions, now is a really good time to bring those up. And I really think that ideally, hopefully I'd be able to answer any of those. So we're going to go ahead into ForeFlight over here and hopefully get those questions answered. So we have a flight right now going down to, we got a lot of stuff in here, so we'll go ahead and clean this out. We're going to go ahead and flight plan from my home airport. We'll clear this out. We're going to go from KCHD, which is Chandler Municipal out here in Arizona in the US. And then we are going to then move into our next point of landing, which we'll say is going to be TUS, which is Tucson International. So going down to Tucson, we'll go ahead and talk about planning both a VFR flight as well as a IFR flight. So a VFR flight, presumably the idea is that you're able to fly based on looking outside and being able to decide your route based on visual checkpoints. So every few miles or so, you want to come up with a checkpoint. If you push and hold with two fingers, you're able to get this distance and course measure, which will give you about the distance. So we come up to this first point here, we have the Santan Mountains. If you push and hold along the lines, it'll actually allow you to pick that visual point, which is VPSTN, for that flagged waypoint. The beauty of that flag is when you're communicating with air traffic control, they're now able to know where you are exactly. So we'll take off out of Chandler and it'll tell you the heading you want to fly in magnetic, so 127 degrees, and that leg is 9 miles. Let's see. So we do have some airspace to worry about here. We have the Delta airspace surrounding Chandler, and that'll be highlighted right here. So we can zoom out just so you can see that highlighted right there in that area. The green is that Delta, and then we also are going to have that Bravo airspace going from 6,000 to 9,000 feet in that area. So basically until we're outside of this Bravo shelf in here, that goes up to 9,000 to 6,000. We're going to want to stay below 6,000 because that way you don't have to worry about getting that Bravo clearance. If you plan to stay out of it, then you are good to go. So we'll plan, since the heading of this cross country appears to be on a heading of about 127 to 139, let's say about 139 degrees, that's a heading of east. So we're going to want to go odd thousands plus 500 feet. So one way we could check that is we could go to our little helpful thing over here, this altitude selector, and we're going to go VFR and eastbound. So we'll take 5,500. And what that'll enable us to do then is look and make sure that we're going to be able to clear all of the obstacles. So here it looks like we have a peak at 3,100, and we could follow our course down. It doesn't look like we really run into any issues here. We got the highest one at 2755, and we could come down along this route. Here's one at 4,520, so you'd still have about 1,000 feet there, and then all the way down into Tucson International. So 5,500 appears to be a reasonably good altitude. You could go a little bit higher depending on the plane you're flying. You want to make sure that you are at least cruised out for ideally at least a third of your flight. So you don't want to waste a whole lot of time climbing up really, really high if you don't have to, because you're just going to be not progressing forward as productively along your path as you could if you leveled off a little lower. So for the sake of this route, we'll go ahead and stick to 5,500. And that makes it so we don't even have to worry about these Bravo shells because we won't even be getting up to 6,000 feet. So the next point we'll go ahead and pick along our route is some towns. So we have this town right here called Coolidge. So we'll go ahead and pick that along the route. And that is right there. So that's going to be our next point will be right abeam Coolidge town there. Then we got this reservoir that appears to be another good point. And then we have this peak that we're going to be flying right over Newman Peak. And that'll be another really good opportunity to have a checkpoint. We also have this power plant that we're going to fly right next to. So we could have the power plant there. And then we also have all these airports that we can use. So we have this other cement plant right there. That's another flagged waypoint, and also right next to Marana Regional Airport right there. So as we're coming down, now we're coming into Tucson. We could pretty much say that that'll be our last checkpoint. That's about 20 miles. It's a little bit longer than we might like, but being pretty familiar with the area, they like us to fly to a mountain. So that'll be our point right before we get to the airport. So a couple things. You'd want to check and create a nav log. The nice thing is ForeFlight actually will give you some version of what a nav log is if you put in a plane with a profile. So we'll go ahead and click this airplane that we have here. It's a nice Cessna 172K model, and it'll calculate our time and route. And if we put in our estimated time of departure, let's say we want to go in, I don't know, 30 minutes or so. So we'll just make it 9 o'clock this evening. That'll be departing, and then it'll give us our ETA. So it's about 45 minutes en route time. And we have about a 3-knot tailwind, and according to the fuel burn that we have in the performance setup in this profile here, we'll be able to burn about 7 gallons an hour in the climb. I can go ahead and estimate 9, and in the descent, we'll go ahead and estimate a little bit less than the cruise. Since we're descending, we don't need to burn as much fuel. So we can do that, and that'll hopefully give us a little bit more accurate reading on the fuel. We could also go in and put those speeds in. Our climb true airspeed is probably going to be somewhere around 73 to 75 knots. So we'll say about 74. This plane happens to climb pretty well. And as well, our true airspeed is probably not going to be 116. So we'll go ahead and change that. It's probably gonna be more like 110, realistically. So now that we have that in there, it looks like it'll take about 47 minutes or so, 87 miles. Now we'll go ahead and take off, plan the takeoff out of Chandler. And the first thing we're gonna wanna do is check the weather at Chandler. So we can go to this weather tab and check and see that the winds are favoring a specific runway. So it looks like that runway 4s, it'll tell you either 4 left or 4 right are the ones that have the best wind. And then you could even click to get even a little bit more information about those runways. So we'll just assume we're going to use 4 left for now. And we'll then go ahead and check the weather at our destination. So we want to look ahead. So if we're leaving in about 30 minutes, we'd want to look somewhere around an hour to an hour and a half. It looks like we have an important thing here called a Notam telling us that the runway 3 and 21 is going to be closed. So that's important. And we can go ahead and click on that actually, and it'll tell us that it's closed from January 6th to February 8th. So that runway is going to be closed for a while. And instead of the METAR, which tells us what the current weather is, we can look at the TAF, which is going to forecast what it'll be. So here we have a forecast for 9 p.m. It looks like the winds are about 150 at 6 knots. So we're going to want to land on a runway favoring 160. So it looks like that the winds are going to be probably, if it's 150, that would be somewhere close to the 1-1 runways. So either 1-1 left or 1-1 right. Both are sufficiently long. They got 10,000, almost 11,000 feet and 8,400 feet. So both really long runways. One of them is really wide and the other one is a little bit narrower, but both really good runways. And we've now figured that information out. We'd want to write down all of our frequencies to get the weather, 123.8. And you can actually call the ATIS phone number as well. So if you click that in here, it'll allow you to call the ATIS if you're doing this on your phone to get the weather. It'll give you a clearance delivery frequency for when you're coming in and the approach controls where you would want to contact Tucson approach, as well as the tower, which operates 24 hours. So the tower is never going to close. So we're going to always be wanting to contact that tower. We have an emergency frequency there. That's 121.5. The other important thing is we do have pattern altitude. So this is how we're going to get into the airport and fly in the pattern around the runway. So when we're planning our descent, we're going to want to plan to be at around 3,450 feet, 3,443 to be exact, but we're going to go ahead and round it up to 3,500 feet. So if we're planning to be at 5,500, we'll go ahead and do a little bit of math here on this scratch pad to plan out our descent. So we'll go ahead here and plan out our descent. So if we're at 5,500, we'll subtract 3,500, and that'll equal 2,000 feet to lose. And if we want a normal descent of about 300 feet per nautical mile, so minus 300 feet, zeros cancel out, making it really nice. 20 divided by 3, that's going to be about 7 miles out. We'll want to start our descent to lose that 2,000 feet. So that's how you would figure that math out to get your 7 nautical miles. So then you come here and hopefully it's pretty close. So right around A Mountain, we're going to be 6 miles out. So right around A Mountain, we can plan to be starting our descent for the pattern to make our approach into land. And that's the basics of how you would want to plan a flight, taking into account the weather, the Notams, knowing your distances. We didn't really go through much performance calculations, but that's also really important. So that's a VFR flight where you could fly to those VFR waypoints and get your flight in all based on visual. Let's say now we'll go ahead and clear all this out. We'll do the same flight, but we'll plan it for IFR. So now we're planning for an instrument flight. As you can see, we have that alert NOTAM with the runway being closed. We do have 2 other runways that we could use though. So that's good to know. Now that we've got our flight plans, we can do this IFR, which actually makes this a little bit easier. We'll go ahead and switch our layer over to the IFR low chart. So just to give a brief overview, you got the Victor Airways here in black with the V's. Those are airways that connect VORs. And then the Tango routes or the T routes are going to be connected via GPS routing. So in our plane here that we have the ability to fly both. So we'll go ahead up here into the flight plan. One thing that you do have for IFR is you do have the ability to pick routes that are cleared a lot of the time, which I think is kind of cool. The one that I am actually going to go with that I think is probably the simplest is going to be the PXR Dingo 5 from the TFD transition. So we're going to go ahead and do that at 6,000 feet. And this is actually what this is going to be. So we have the departure here. We could go into procedures and departures, and we'll be able to find a departure if there was one. There isn't, so we'll go ahead and plan to just file this. So we'll file directly to the VOR and then go down Stanfield along Victor 16. And once you get there, you actually become part of the arrival into Tucson. So if we go into the procedures and check the arrivals, there's a Dingo 5 arrival that we are actually able to fly. So you could start it from the Phoenix VOR and have it go down from there. The one thing we will want to note is we'd want to fly at least at 7,000 feet because we will be within 22 miles of either the Phoenix or Stanfield VORs because that hold distance is 33. So the MOCA there with that star, the 6,700 minimum obstacle clearance altitude is going to be giving us that navigational coverage within 22 miles of a VOR. So that is going to work if we want to fly at 7,000 feet. So we'll go ahead and change our altitude over here in that flight plan. Whoops. We'll change it to 7,000, and it looks like that'll work out pretty nicely. So we're going to go ahead and change the arrival, Dingo 5, and we're going to actually start it from Phoenix. And we don't actually even need that. That is the entire flight right there. So now the entire flight is on that arrival, and we can actually now allow for us to see the plate. So basically we'll fly to Phoenix, be it 7,000 all the way down to Stanfield over this intersection Baser, down toward Dingo, and then over to Mava. And then we'll expect the transition from Phoenix. We'll fly over the Vortac, that radial to Stanfield, then the Baser, then the Tucson. Then we'll go ahead and continue from over Dingo. You would fly via the Tucson radial to Mava, then to runway 11 left. We'll expect that heading to intercept the localizer for the approach, clearance for 11 left. So that is what we're going to do. That makes filing IFR into Tucson from this airport really easy. You just fly the route the whole time and you're set up perfectly for the approach. That is some basics of how to file instrument flight plans as well as create a VFR flight plan. Obviously, it's really good to have the instrument stuff as a backup. That way, if anything ever happens, you have a backup for what you're doing, even if the weather is good. I urge you all to tune in next time, and hopefully you'll get something out of this that can help you out when you are creating your flight plans. If you like these videos and would like to see more, please let me know. I'm happy to do this, and thank you all for tuning in and looking forward to hearing from you soon. Bye-bye.